I'm going to perform two more examples of composition of functions. The first composition I want to find is I want to find f of g of 4, for f of x being the square root of x and g of x being x squared plus 4. So if we remember what a composition means, it performs the function rules consecutively from right to left order on that number. So the way I recommend doing it is if you're going to write it out as individual functions, you write the composition as f of g of 4. You perform the operation g of 4, which is going to give me f of 4 squared plus 4. 4 squared is 16 plus 4 is 20. So I want to do f of 20. Well, my function rule f is the square root of x. So that's going to give me the square root of 20. And when we simplify that, that is 2 square root of 5. So it says perform the function rules consecutively in right to left order. Like the last example I did on the previous video, I can also write the composition of functions. First thing I need to realize is that this is the outside function and this is the inside function. And what I want to do is I want to write down the outside function, except where there's an x, put parentheses, and inside the parentheses write down the inside function. So if I want to write down f of g of x, this is equal to the outside function, which is the square root of x. So I write the square root of x, except where there's an x, I put parentheses. Well, there's a default set of parentheses underneath this radical. And inside that parentheses, I write the inside function. So that gives me the single composed function for f of g of x. And I can evaluate this at 4, just like I did the up here, except I'm going to do it in one step. And now that gives me the square root of 4 squared plus 4, which is the square root of 20, which is 2 square root of 5. Now, what we need to look at is we also need to look at the domain of this function. Remember that the domain of a composite function is all of the x's in the domain of g, such that g of x is also in the domain of f. So I need to figure out, okay, what's the domain of f? Well, the f has to be greater, the x is greater than or equal to 0. And if you notice here that any number I put in for x is going to give me a number that is greater than or equal to 0. So my default domain is going to be all real numbers because that's the domain of my original function. For the final example, I'm going to use f of x is 1 over x. G of x is x plus 3. I'm going to do two compositions. The first one is f of g of 2. And then the second composition I want to do is g of f of 2. So remember, it says perform the function rules consecutively in right to left order. So I'm going to do the first one. F of g of 2 is equal to f of g of 2. Well, g of 2 means put a 2 in there. So f of 2 plus 3, which is, I want to do f of 5. And then my f function says to take 1 over whatever that number is. Now let's do it g of f of 2. Well, g of f of 2, so it's g of x and then f of x inside. I do the f of x first, so that says do 1 over x, which so this would be 1 over 2. So I have g of 1/2. Now I want to take g of 1/2, so that is equal to 1/2 plus 3, which is equal to 3 1/2. one thing that I want you to notice is that these two numbers are different numbers. So it really does matter which order that you do your function compositions. Okay, so order does matter when combining functions.